Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. This has been something that a lot of people have been very excited about, and I'm excited to do this again. Always a good excuse to talk to my boy, Comic Dave Smith, host of Part of the Problem, One-Third Legion of Skanks, his comedy special Libertas hit #1. Frequent Joe Rogan guest, unlike Jo Jorgensen. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Libertarian Party politics and social media and the so-called loser brigade, which I think Tom Woods came up with that name, right?
I believe so.
The very ironic Tom Woods calling someone a loser. It's that man has no shame or audience. So, or credentials or any accomplishments this name. Complete failure and everything. What was there was a tweet from the Libertarian National Party, LP National, the Twitter account, basically challenging, or they weren't really confrontational, because someone suggested, Tim Kennedy, MMA guy, that Joe Rogan host a presidential debate between Trump and Biden. Donald Trump jumped in. He said, I'm in. No response from Biden. Immediately came the hit pieces from the Cathedral. Because if they are going to have any venue to get information to Gen Pop, they're superfluous and they're ruined. So this really is an existential threat to them if you have things like this. You're only allowed to have alternative venues if it's under their auspices. As I reminded some people on Twitter, in 1992, Bill Clinton was on Arsenio Hall as a candidate playing the saxophone. People could, oh my God, this guy's amazing. We've seen a saxophone. What can't he do? I mean, obviously, if a man can play a saxophone, he can bring about world peace and about, right? And now it's like, hey, how about like having a debate on a show with a huge audience that would get people involved and excited, young people. That's what they talk about all the time. Let's get people, oh my, are you kidding? This guy's a Holocaust denier, transphobe, blah, 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 blah. He's known for race. The shamelessness is very transparent. So along comes the Libertarian Party, America's third biggest party.
Oh, God.
Third comes right after second. And they're like, hey, Joe Rogan, why don't you have Jo Jorgensen on the show? And I was very embarrassed because it was such a, my Russian brain, I hate weakness. Yeah. I hate it when people publicly beg for things that they're setting themselves up to be humiliated. And I said, hey, hit up Comic Dave Smith. He's been on a few times. Maybe get you in touch. I don't know that he'd take your call. So what was your reaction when you saw that tweet? Did you take it as cringe as I did?
Oh, yes. Oh, it's so bad. It hurts. It like hurts you inside. And just to your point, there really is something about the fear of the corporate press that this could end up happening. Yeah. I mean, because, like Rogan gets over double what the #1 show in cable news gets. It's not just like he's like, approaching the size of the corporate press. He's bigger than all of them. I mean,
and he's got it for 3 hours. It's not just a 15-minute segment.
That's right. So the one thing that they have is like, well, this is where the serious things happen, and the presidential debates happen on CNN. And so you might, whatever. But so if they were to lose that.
The serious place where you talk about how much food Trump dumped in the river, his tweets and his typos, and how many scoops of ice cream he had, serious business.
But they have to keep that veneer of this is actually serious. And then there's so many different dynamics at work here. And then you have Trump, who's just the master troll, who just saw a perfect opportunity to say, okay, I'm in, knowing full well there is 0.0% chance that Joe Biden will take him up on this offer. There's no way Joe Biden will sit down for 3 hours in a not controlled environment with Donald Trump. So Trump knows he gets to say yes.
Do you mean bladder control?
Yeah, well, right. I mean, that alone might be an issue. But look, Joe Biden has to have a controlled situation across the board. I mean, Joe Biden, my God, this guy, Victor Davis Hanson,
Yeah.
said recently about him, who Victor Davis Hanson, I'm not the hugest fan of, but he's a very brilliant guy and very interesting to read. But he said he's never seen a presidential election in his lifetime where there was a candidate like Joe Biden, where literally every time he opens his mouth, there's a chance he might blow the election. Like there is a chance every time he says something. It almost.
What about Trump 2016?
Well, yeah, but
we had that. Come on.
No, but there's something different. There's something different. Trump could say some crazy shit, but he would just own it. And now Joe Biden might collapse into himself, into a black hole, and suck the rest of us in with him. He just said the other day that by the time he's done with his speech, there might be 200 million people dead from COVID. And and then everyone's just kind of like, oh, that's Joe. I don't know. He's got the numbers off a little bit. I don't know. He's just a million times off or whatever, But so you knew Joe. And then, of course, the Libertarian Party, they're trying to find their way to capitalize on the situation. And they end up making this, oh, God. First off, it's pathetic. It's pathetic to be publicly begging. Of course, they're not interested in using people like me or you or trying to ask for help. I know you're not a party member, but you're still a person who they could be like, well, look, you've promoted a lot of ideas that are very similar to ideas we promote. You have a huge audience. What could we gain from that? Guys like me, like Tom, they're not interested in that. So they don't want to go and try to figure out a way. I mean, look, Larry Sharp's a member of the Libertarian Party. He's been on Rogan. I'm a member. I've been on. There's lots of people like this.
Has Tom ever been on Rogan?
He, if he has, I don't remember it. I don't recall.
That's about right.
There you go.
It would have been memorable anyway. Just an embarrassment.
But instead, well, yeah, I all right, I'm leaving this alone.
I love you, Tom.
But instead, they go this route of just begging him for it. And I just hate the garbage arguments. It's like the worst, most cringy argument that they make, where it's like they don't want to stand on principle or what they believe. So they'll do this thing where it's like, well, we're against a two-party system. Let's break the duopoly. There shouldn't be just two parties. There shouldn't be just two candidates. But then their argument is there should be three.
But not four.
Yeah, right. So what? Why is three such an improvement over two?
It's a prime number, asshole.
Yeah, that might be the autistic argument that I'm getting from these LP members. They'll say, by the way, the same people who will, if you criticize Jo Jorgensen at all, they'll be like, well, she's the best in the race. I mean, she agrees with you a lot more than Biden and Trump, are the same people who will mock someone who makes the lesser of two evil argument.
Yeah.
So they'll mock the lesser of two evil, but I mean, you have to pick the lesser of three evil, right? That's just common sense. It's this weird thing, and it's just sad. And ultimately, it's like, why should libertarians, or anyone who just believes in freedom or limiting government, why should you want Jo Jorgensen on there? What is it that they think she's going to do? Have you listened to a Jo Jorgensen speech before? It's probably not going to be a game changer if she gets on Rogan.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, there was this tweet I saw, and I don't know if you saw it, and it actually upset me a lot, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so her speechwriter, who's got I think 1,000 followers on Twitter, which doesn't and I'm just saying that point, a lot of people might not have seen it, you had either tweeted that I should be the LP National Twitter account or something about her, and he replied with a gif of someone digging, and he goes, oh, looking for a good take from Dave Smith, and I sat there, and I'm like, there's very few people with any kind of public platform and stature who are bringing interest and excitement to the Libertarian Party. Gary Johnson, for all his faults, had a huge advantage, and so did Bill Weld, because they were household names among the political intelligentsia. The Libertarian Party could say with a straight face, we have two politicians who have a history of getting elected. Governor of Massachusetts as a Republican is not a minor accomplishment. These are prominent figures, so you owe us at least the cred of giving us some column width. And it worked. They got buzz. Now they don't have that, and that's fine. Jo Jorgensen is an academic and a lifelong LP member, and she's got her views, and that's correct. But what is there? So that if they want to get in the polls, Pokemon go to the polls, they have to figure out how are we going to get buzz? How are we going to get attention? I agree with Joe Biden is not an article, right? Like Libertarian Party challenges Joe Rogan is not an article. So you are in a position to kind of get some buzz. So I thought it was very stupid to go after you publicly, number one. And number two is I can't think of any other case other than like an Ana Navarro going after Trump. You know, she's ostensibly a Republican, even though literally everything she says is something wrong with the Republican Party.
Right.
I've never, even Democrats don't have the Republicans as much as she does. I can't think of any other case where like a speechwriter from a party is going after like the other, like you're more known than she is.
Oh, I mean, like
and that's not to insult her. That's just statistically the facts.
Yes, and I've brought more people into the party, and I've brought the ideas of libertarianism to more people than she has. And it's like, look, they have some view that they know better than everyone else. I've seen Spike Cohen, who's the vice presidential nominee, give these kind of speeches and these talks about how to present the message of libertarianism to people so that they listen to you and that it converts them and introduce these ideas to them. And there's something about it where you're like, Spike, who have you converted to libertarianism? He's the VP nominee of the third biggest party in the country. He's running for vice president. He's got like 30,000 Twitter followers. Like no one knows who this guy is. And it's like, maybe instead of you taking this like, well, here's how you have to do it and here's the wrong way to do it, why don't you listen to people who have actually been effective at bringing this message to people, and maybe you could learn something from them. I'm not saying I'm like the end all be all of it, but you might go like, well, okay, Ron Paul brought this message to a lot of people. Ayn Rand brought this message to a lot of people. Milton Friedman brought, I'm more interested in what someone like that says than I am in someone who's a complete unknown, who hasn't been successful at this at all. And look, obviously, the fact is, the thing with you taking over the LP Twitter originated from like us fucking around on this show and joking about it. But the reason why it's gotten so much traction is for a few reasons. It's like, number one, because it's funny and it's fun to be like, oh, how funny is Malice on Twitter? Wouldn't it be hilarious if he was running this? But it also shows like this frustration with the way the Libertarian Party is presenting themselves through social media. And they're like, maybe if we gave it to somebody who actually knows how to use this medium, we would be a lot more successful. And so they can, look down on that and kind of like not want to, I mean, I understand if they don't want to give you their Twitter account, but they could at least like take the message and go, okay, yeah, there's something here that a lot of libertarians are very upset with us over. Maybe we could learn from that.
That's the other thing. Social media is the great equalizer. Donald Trump tweeted his way into the presidency, right? Yeah. So you're the third party. You have some major disadvantages. You have institutional disdain, like you're not taken seriously. You're not going to have the fundraising. You're not going to have the name recognition. Ballot access is not automatic for you. You got to fight for it. So the one thing that you can have as David versus Goliath is the great equalizer, social media. There is an asymmetry where if you have nothing to lose, like this is a kind of Thaddeus Russell thesis, if you're at the bottom, you have nothing to lose, swing for the fences, because worst case scenario, it's a draw. It's all upside for you. So if you're going ham on the Republican Party, God, wow. If you're going ham on the Republican Party, if you're going ham on the Democratic Party, there's lots of disaffected Republicans that might listen to you, and there's lots of Democrats who might enjoy that you're getting Republicans upset, and the inverse. There's lots of Republicans who are going to be rooting for you when you make fun of Democrats, and there are a lot of Democrats who are going to be receptive to you when you're making fun of what they perceive to be correctly a travesty of a candidate. And you can make the Republican case also that Donald Trump's travesty of a candidate if you're a certain type of Republican very easily. So, one of the points is like, oh, just because someone has a lot of Twitter followers doesn't mean they're persuasive. Fine. What is your metric? By what metric are you saying that you understand how to persuade people? Like, have you sold a lot of books? Do you have a TV show? Like, if people aren't even listening to you, your ability to persuade by definition is nil. Just like if you're broke, you can't tell me which restaurant's better than the other because you can't afford to eat any of them. It's a non-starter.
Yes, and libertarians who believe in the market should at least say like, okay, well, look, there are some market results from some people who have gone out there into the market and created something that other people find valuable. So if you haven't done, like, what do you have? Oh, and like you said, I'm open to tell me what metric you do have to show that you're successful here. The Libertarian Party is, you needed, obviously, like to the point you were making before, like, okay, so we don't have, look, we got 2 established governors who were elected as Republicans in blue states. That's why we're serious. So we don't have that this year. I mean, all of that didn't do anything for liberty anyway. It just allowed a platform for Gary Johnson to not know what Aleppo was. So but it's not as if
he got 3%. That's not a
sure.
joke.
So he got some votes, no question about that. But so this year, there's no question you would have had to go in like with a little bit more of a strategy. Yeah. Okay, so how are we going to get this attention? And the strategy so far has been horrible. I mean, if we were sitting around just like, think tanking this, like brainstorming about what the strategy for the LP, assuming, we both were, campaign advisors or something like that. And someone had thrown out to us, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start tweeting our support for Black Lives Matter. We're going to say things like, it's not enough to not be racist. We must be anti-racist. And Spike's going to be posting about transgender genocides and all these things. Really? Oh, yes. Yes. Spike Cohen had a long post on Facebook about how we're witnessing one of the major stories of 2020 is that we're watching the beginning of a transgender genocide. And his evidence for this was that I think 25, something in that ballpark, transgender people have been murdered this year. Okay, there was only 24 murdered last year. So we've already passed the total of transgender people murdered for all of last year in not a full year this year.
Let me break this down and take it seriously, because it's very easy to take things like this and dismiss them. And what I like to do, but with the new right and your reader, is to take arguments like this on their face and argue them on their face. And you're talking to someone who has Candy Darling's autographed passport photo framed in his kitchen where a woman belongs. So for those who don't know who that is, you can Google it. The number genocide, a good way to determine if genocide is occurring is the numbers, right? Sure. 6 million fewer Jews after the Holocaust. That's telling you something. That's a huge. Poland, no Jews left. These are genocidal. There's many other genocides. The Holodomor, the Ukraine, is another genocide. Mao in China. The number of people who identify as transgender is not increasing. It is not decreasing. It is increasing at a huge proportion, especially in Britain. There was a book by that woman, I forget her name. She was on Rogan. She was hugely lambasted by this. What J.K. Rowling is talking about is, and this is something gay men have fought against for decades, is increasingly young gay males are being told not that they're men who are attracted to men, but they are actually trans, which is for years that gay dudes had to be like, I'm not a girl. I'm a dude who likes dick. And now it's like, no, you actually are a girl, and pumping them full of hormones. And this is something that Rowling and others are like, this is the left-wing version of conversion therapy. And it's sterilizing, taking estrogen, a generation of young gay males, and this has to stop. So that's one thing, number one. Number two is the transgender murder rate per capita is lower than the murder rate for cis people. It is more dangerous to be a cis person in terms of getting murdered than a trans person in America. That's a good thing. Well, I don't know if that's a good thing, like which number do you want worse, but it's a good thing that these fears that to be trans is automatically a death sentence is not accurate. Further, given there's so few, there's like a hand, like 24. If you go case by case, which you can't go case by case when there's 5,000 people, right, or 6 million, God forbid. You can when it's 25. And what we're seeing in these cases isn't like this idea that like, oh, I'm a guy, in makeup, taking estrogen in the heels, someone grabs me on the street and bludgeons my head in with a pipe. These are cases where they're murdered by people they know.
Yes.
It's not hate crimes. So to claim that it is a lie. And what people should be championing is, look, it is safe to be trans in this country, and that's a good thing. Even if you don't agree with the trans concept, we all agree that people should be secure in their own person and in their own bathroom. So I did not know he did that. It's not accurate.
Right. And the fact is, and the fact is that there are, if you want to look at why more the number of transgender people murdered, again, like as you pointed out, not being murdered for being trans, but just trans people who happen to get murdered
They're murdered with trans, not because of trans.
That's right. That's right. But you know, it's like, as you said, if you look into the cases, usually it's like, you know, an ex-lover, a friend, the typical type of things where people get murdered in general. But look, the murder rate is up across the board. The number of people who identify as trans goes up every year. And also police are better at categorizing people who are trans as in fact trans. So these factors alone might account for the increase. I don't know. There might be other factors too. Also, when you're dealing with numbers so small, random events can just account for the increase. But regardless of that, the other point, which is about the libertarian strategy, is that I think what the Libertarian Party really didn't understand, and a lot of times what we're dealing with here are people who are pretty good on the issues. And this speaks to a lot of people in the Libertarian Party. Pretty good on the issues, but hopelessly blue-pilled. So they're not bad on policy issues. Like, you wouldn't even really disagree with them if they went through their list, maybe here and there a little bit, but generally speaking, pretty good. But they're hopelessly blue-pilled, and they don't understand. They're completely tone deaf to the moment that's happening right now in the country. And what they like, I tried to explain it to people this way. I'd go, okay, so you know the people who are really concerned with racists and the alt-right, you know, try to imagine that racist alt-right people had full control of the political apparatus, the entire corporate press, all of Hollywood, all of big corporations, all of professional sports, all of it was under the control of racist alt-right people. Now think how fucking sensitive to a racist alt-right message you would be. Well, that's what woke shit is. That's where we are with it. And there's this whole like the entire, say, broadly speaking, right half of libertarians are just fed up with this shit. And when they see you speaking that language or pandering to that group of people, they want nothing to do with you. This is your boy.
It's not nothing to do with you. We want you as far away from me as possible.
Yes, exactly. Like Tim Pool, whose show you were just on, you did a fantastic job. Love the hat. Tim
it took two fans and airmail to get that motorized propeller baby going.
It was great. It was great how like you'd be making these really brilliant, serious points, and I'd just be like listening, focusing to you, and then half the time you'd come out of it and go, "Oh my god, this stupid hat is still on his head."
I forgot I was wearing it. So I'm talking about the Atlantic and its history. I'm getting us into World War I and Randolph Ward. Like I watched the clip and I have this fucking special needs hat on.
But it was so perfectly Michael Malice. Like it was just, I don't know how else to say it. But so they kind of don't get this, and they go, "Oh, you're making this big thing out of nothing. It's just a tweet. Who cares?" And it's like, no, you don't understand how prevalent this is in people's mind and how sick of it they are. How like appalled by this woke shit being everywhere people are. And that is something that you kind of have to understand if you're going to run a national political campaign in America today, because this is like this is the cultural dynamic, which is actually something that motivates people far more. But the point I wanted to make about the Tim Pool thing was that Tim said he's basically an ex-lefty who's like, I'm homeless now, and he was looking at the Libertarian Party, and then he saw Jo Jorgensen starting to pander to the woke shit, and he said, I'm voting for Trump. He goes, fuck this. I kind of felt like I was kind of a libertarian, but his whole thing is a rejection of this woke PC authoritarian shit. And so this is a guy, just one guy who's got millions of viewers who you could have had, and now you turned him off. So like, how can you not look at that and go, there's no way that just do a cost benefit. There's no way that you gained more from that messaging than it lost you.
Let's suppose it's a good but let's pretend it's a good idea to alienate Tim Pool, right? For the sake of 200 million. Yeah, what you know what I mean? Sure, like if it's like I get rid of Tim Pool, I get Montana as an electoral vote. That I make that choice as a candidate. That's not a hard one. Fine, you alienated Tim Pool. What have you gained? Show me the receipts.
Yeah. And it's going to be what they'll say is that, well, we've been able to talk to all these people at Black Lives Matter protests, and what those Black Lives Matter protests.
Like Maj Touré?
Right.
Who they ran out of the party?
Well, that's right. They don't, right. But they'll claim that they know better than Maj how to speak to these fucking these groups, which is the most insane shit. But so they'll go, well, we were just at this Black Lives Matter rally, and they were saying, hey, we completely agree with you. We want to end the war on drugs and end qualified immunity, and we really like what you have to say. And all those people, like, they're going to go, okay, yeah, thought about it, and they'll be voting for Biden in November. Or staying home. And the fact that these guys can't see that, it's been a shit show for them.
Okay, I just had one of my poll questions come to my mind. Which would be more of a train wreck to watch? Okay, one of these Libertarian Party members talking to someone from Black Lives Matter, or Ayn Rand talking to someone from Black Lives Matter?
Well, I mean, they might both be train wrecks, but I would love to see Ayn Rand talking to someone from Black Lives Matter. It'd be amazing.
The plot is a train wreck, quite literally.
But from people who like, because I've heard a lot of people who were like, used to go to Ayn Rand events and listen to her speak, and she would always like hang out and answer questions afterward. And people did say that she was like, she was perfectly lovely. Like when you would come up and like talk to her, even when people who were like very ignorant would ask her questions, she was always very kind to them. So it's probably a little bit different than like, when she was on Donahue or something like that. But I mean, if you insulted her, she'd probably get pretty snappy.
Perceived as an insult. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's right. Yeah.
So let's talk about something Ayn Rand got right and something Ayn Rand got wrong. One of the things that Ayn Rand got wrong, I think, that you and I are agreeing with, is she had this belief that if a political candidate just has the right positions and explains them clearly, and Jo Jorgensen's perfectly articulate. I don't think I think she's very good at explaining her positions, that somehow the masses are going to be like, oh, I'm going to vote for you. She really genuinely believed this. She said that if Barry Goldwater had like a more philosophical approach to his worldview, he would have won the election. This, in my mind, is completely deranged. It is less realistic than any of the characters in Atlas Shrugged. There has been many, many studies, more than you can count, about how people make voting choices. The claim that they sit down and listen to speeches and do the research is nonsensical and incoherent. I don't think anyone can find one example of this ever happening, let alone millions of examples. So that's something she gets way off that I think the LP also doesn't understand. Something she gets right. She despised libertarianism, in part because it was so associated with Murray Rothbard, and you're not exactly pals towards the end, or towards even the middle. And she goes, you can't promote this ideology, or ideology of freedom, without a philosophical base. If there's no grounding, you can't really make it stick. And she's like, they stole my ideas, they're not giving me credit. Okay, cool story, bro. But the point is, like, it doesn't work just to have these free-floating ideas of liberty without any reasoning behind it. And to me and to you, as you and your theme song says, at the end of the day, it's all about freedom. Like, period. Like, what do you value in politics? Freedom. That's my list. Like, everything else we can negotiate. That's the be all and end all. What that plays out, so on and so forth. I was a Cato intern a long, long time ago. They weren't like this when I was an intern there. They have a website called libertarianism.org, and they just recently ran a piece, which I didn't read, TLDR, by the guy who you had the debate with, Andy. What's his name?
Andy Craig,
where he said that you can't argue for liberty without arguing for equality. And the very premise of Atlas Shrugged is against equality. That when Rand was on Donahue said, and Rand's not a libertarian, so maybe he's right, she's wrong, where she said, if you'd rather everyone be enslaved than some people would be rich, well, that is what Atlas Shrugged is against. If you can't have two ultimate goals, right? You can't be both for liberty and for equality. When push comes to shove, which is it going to be? I do not believe or care that if a country gets freer, people are going to get more equal. I'm for maximizing freedom. I'm for maximizing opportunity. This equality of opportunity, as I keep talking about till I'm blue in the face that these boomer cunts talk about, is a progressive idea. The progressives had this as their argument against socialism. It is the last chapter of Richard Eli's autobiography, Ground Under Our Feet. I have a signed copy. I think it's from 36 or 38. He was literally Woodrow Wilson's professor. He's the founder of the American Economic Association, which is one of the big ways the cathedral got established. And he's talking about, I believe in equality of opportunity 100 years ago. So What are your thoughts about this idea that equality is something that libertarians should aspire to?
Oh, I mean, it's complete bullshit, and it's infuriating because it's actually something that is essentially incompatible with libertarianism. It's you can have freedom or you can have equality, but I'm not even sure you can have equality, to be honest, because in any type of system, in order to equality is going to take tremendous force to come about, and then
And
of
can I
course
say something? They very quickly
Sure.
say, well, we can't have equality, but we have less inequality. And at that point, like, what's the point of fighting for it at all?
Right. And of course, if you have freedom, then people have the freedom to make very different choices, which will lead to very different outcomes. And this, I mean, I've talked a lot about this as well, but the whole idea of like freedom of opportunity, it's basically conceding the argument before you even start. Basically, the way most people get their opportunities in life are what's handed down to them from the previous generation. And I mean that both genetically, economically, just in terms of, environmentally, all of these things are where you get your opportunity in life. So if you don't believe in equality of outcome, well, the outcome is going to lead to some people being better off than others, and that will lead to their children having a better opportunity than others. It's all kind of the same thing. And if you believe in equality of opportunity, well, then everyone would have to have equal education. Everyone would have to have an equal family life. Everyone would have to have an equal healthcare access. I mean, how else could you possibly justify true equality of opportunity? And if you believe in freedom, you could kind of see that you've just given up the entire argument so it's all, and of course, like you said, it came from the progressives who were pushing, public schools and all of this awful stuff and income taxes and World War I. And so, yes, the Federal Reserve, basically everything that's wrong, everything that's kind of ruined the last 100 years or so is based on this idea. Equality, I suppose you can say in a very loose sense that you believe in like equal application of the law or equal, natural rights for all people. But this is really not truly equality. I mean, it's just it's a real stretch, and so I just think it's silly, and it has nothing to do with our goals. And I would say maybe just the only thing I disagree with you on is like you could have more than one goal, although one has to be your ultimate goal.
That's what I'm saying,
But you could say I'm for freedom and prosperity, and push comes to shove, I'll go with freedom. But I think that the two go hand in hand, and with maximum freedom, you'll have more prosperity. But equality is something that you're going to get less and less of the more freedom you have. And this has been demonstrated. I mean, like if you look at even in like the Scandinavian countries where they have all of these policies, to help, women, they pay women for like, I think a year plus for maternity leave and all of these other things. They have more differences in outcomes between the genders than they do in more capitalist countries, because, if you give people the freedom to do something, they do what they want to do. And that's not always what you want them to do.
Here's another thing that was a low-hanging fruit from the Libertarian Party that just shows what a disaster it is and why they should be condemned in many ways. Jo Jorgensen got scratched by a bat, right? And she had that tweet. It's like, oh, I have to cancel this campaign rally because I got scratched by a bat. What a great opportunity as a libertarian. She's the only one who would be for a free market healthcare system. Not even close. There's no way Trump or Biden are close to it. And she could walk us through what happens when you get bit by a bat. I have to go to the emergency room. This is how much it costs. This is how much it would cost in a free market system. Here's me and my doctor. I have insurance. Insurance is cost at every step. I have to buy the rabies vaccine. Because of the FDA, blah, 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 blah. In a free market, this costs 5 cents to produce. With profit, I'd be able to buy it for $20. Yeah. There's a video that is exploiting something that is unique to her, something that is funny and memorable, and that teaches her message. This is the kind of thing that could easily go by, that's very shareable, has nothing to do with equality or Black Lives Matter or racism, that would be appealing to a lot of people. The thought of them doing something like this is zero.
Yeah, it's it's a great point. Instead, she just puts it out there. It becomes this punchline, and like she rolled with it nicely, but she got nothing out of it. And this is like what I was getting at before. This would be the whole, like, the day after they got nominated, that you would be sitting down with all of your top people and being like, okay, what is the strategy here?
Right.
How are we going to get buzz? And the thing that I would, probably have pushed if I was in that meeting, not that they're interested in having me there, but the thing that I would have said is that we have to be willing to take the most provocative stance that we can really back up. Like, really take something that's going to make the corporate press want to go, oh my God, this is so dangerous. And then we can just destroy them on that issue. Yeah. I would have come out right away and said, I wish Trump had colluded with Putin. Like, I would have, you know what I mean? Like, I wish he had been in bed with the Russians. We'd be better off if he had. And people would be like, how can you possibly back that up? And then be like, here's how I can back that up, you idiots. Because 70% of the American people want us out of these wars. If we were working with Putin, we wouldn't have pulled out of this nuclear arms agreement. We wouldn't have done blah, blah, blah. Like, go through the list and just own them on that. Oppose the lockdowns. We're against all of the, and you have to take like a really bold stance, like really bold. You know what? Especially for Jo Jorgensen, who's like, she's not an anarchist, she's a constitutionalist. So she should just straight up be like, these governors should be thrown in jail. They've all violated the Constitution. I mean, take ballsy, bold stances that the media won't be able to ignore and then win the argument. But they're not built like that. Like, they don't.
Do you know what's even scarier? William Weld said something that's far more provocative than anything Jo Jorgensen ever said. They complain about William Weld fairly. He's not really a libertarian. He was just exploiting the party to try to further his image. He went on, I think it was MSNBC, and called for President Trump to be put to death. Yeah. He said, this is treason. And let me remind you all, the penalty for treason up to and includes the death penalty. He said it explicitly. He didn't say treason, and people like treason is death penalty. Like, oh shit. No, he said it verbatim. And he got a lot of headlines. He didn't get written out of polite society. You know what I mean? So she's in a position to go as far as that. And crickets, absolute crickets.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a million of these like things that you could do, positions that you could take like that might actually, get you somewhere. But the point is that you have to take a shot at it. And I think what libertarians and people in the LP, I guess somewhat surprisingly, maybe not really, but they're people just like anyone else who's in a political party. So if you start criticizing Jo Jorgensen and Spike Cohen right now, a lot of them get upset because that's their candidate and it's a month and a half out.
And because it's hitting the nail on the head, though. That's why they're getting upset.
Well, that's part of it too. Yeah. Yes, but look, if they were going to be successful, we would already see evidence of that. Yeah. That, this is the time. We're only a little more than a month away from the election. They're not winning the election. So this is over after November 3rd. The time is right now, right in this moment. How much noise are you making? What is this a game changer? And it's just obvious that they've failed and blown this moment. And so, it's
like hashtag let her speak. No one's putting a muzzle on you, lady.
Yes.
You've got your social media. You've got YouTube. You're not getting banned anywhere.
You know what?
Flap your gums.
It was Eric July, who I love. I think is just fantastic. He said this about Black Lives Matter, and he said what he hates about Black Lives Matter, and I think he was like a big Malcolm X fan. Yeah. That he hates Black Lives Matter, and he goes, "I hate any group that's begging white people for something.
Yes,
that's saying, will you please do this for me? We need all of you to do this for us." He goes, I'm not a bitch. I want a movement that's like, this is what Black people are going to do for ourselves. We're not asking you for anything. It's like, I don't care if some white person hates me. Like, I don't care. I don't care how you feel. And there's something about that where it's like this attitude of, please let her in the debates. Joe Rogan, please have her on her show. It's so not fair. Let her speak. Like, fuck all this shit. Stop being weak. Be strong. Have a message. And then your message can be like, look, all these people love what I have to say. You know what I mean? And then you don't have to beg them for anything. You can just put that out there. And by the way, the let her speak and the I'm with her hashtag that they were using, that they lifted from Hillary Clinton, is just so stupid. First of all, Hillary Clinton's hashtag shouldn't have been I'm with her. Hillary Clinton's such a fucking narcissist, sociopath, moron. Your fucking hashtag should be she's with us, idiot, not I'm with her. This is not how you fucking, this is why you lost to a cartoon character, dummy. So now they're going to borrow the most failed presidential candidate, the presidential candidate who fucking lost to Barack Hussein Obama, struggled to get Bernie Sanders.
The Tom Woods of presidential candidates. Very failed.
Oh my God. It's like, but to not, you know, like she even said the other day in a speech, Jo Jorgensen, in this fucking horrible speech that she gave, she goes, you know, she goes, I don't like identity politics, but I am the only presidential candidate who's not an old white guy. And you're like, well, that's playing identity politics. Like, you don't get to say, I don't like it, and then also make the point and take that. And by the way, you're an old white woman. So like, why is it even that much different? And then she fucking goes on to double down in this speech. And she goes, now I know I've got some criticism from this. And by the way, she's gotten criticism from like me and Scott Horton and you and like fucking libertarians who actually know what they're talking about. But she goes, you know, there was this woman fired for posting All Lives Matter. And it just shows you how much better the free market is at working these things out than the government. And you're like, no, dummy, that's actually.
Wait, she brought up again? I know she brought up.
In a speech.
Okay, hold on. Let's break this down because this is information I did not have. She was doing an interview. I think it was Facebook Live, and someone was asking her about.
No, it was a C-SPAN interview.
C-SPAN.
It might have been on Facebook, but you know,
thank you. It was over monitors. That's why I got confused.
Yeah.
And her point, which I was giving her the benefit of the doubt, was that someone had posted an All Lives Matter thing on their Facebook. That person got fired, and she was using this as an example that the free market is more receptive to perceived racism than the state anyway. So if you really want to do it this way, like stigmatization and things like that are much more effective, which is true. I assumed or had hoped for that this was just a bad example that she just had grabbed handy, that this wasn't literally an example of racism, but this was a demonstration of how quickly and markets and individuals can respond. So you're telling me after she sat down and was like, used a terrible example, she said, no, that is the example I wanted to use of racism being fought?
Yes. And not only did you double, but just to add more to it, it's not just that me and you both like hammered her for this. And I know that you tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but we both acknowledged that this was a really terrible example to use. And like, this was terrible communication because to the vast majority of normal people, they look at this as an example where you'd say, most of the left, I'd say 100% of the right and 2/3 of left of center all the way to the far left would be like, you shouldn't ruin some lady's life over saying something, all lives matter. I mean, you may think that represents some ugly stuff, and maybe this lady was a nasty person or something, who the hell knows, but she's just some lady. She's not a public figure. She's not a policymaker. And then, but it's not just
odds are more likely that she's a moron than a racist.
Yes, far more likely.
If you have to choose between the two,
Yes, but it's not. So the Ron Paul Institute wrote a big article about this, blasting her. She got a lot of criticism from libertarians over this, okay? And still decided just last week to double down on it and bring it up again in a campaign speech of an example of how the market really handles this stuff so well and does a better job than the government ever could. And I'm just saying, like, that's an example where I think most normal people, if they go, a company fired a woman for on her private Facebook page, which she makes sure to point out that it was not a company page, it was her private Facebook page. Most people look at that and go, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. That's the knee-jerk reaction that you have to that, is to go, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. Should be allowed to fire someone. That's her freedom of speech. Now, a strict libertarian may not agree with that and say they have a right to do what they want to do with their own company. But God, this isn't the example you would use. One more little thing to it. She's giving this speech in a park in, where was it? Oh God, I can't remember where the park was. But she's giving a speech in a park where a mother was arrested earlier this year in April for bringing her kids to the park. So you're like sitting there, you're like, maybe don't bring up that example. Maybe let's go with what happened right here, where the government threw a fucking woman in chains and then into a cage for the crime of bringing her children to a park. Maybe that's the one we'd go with.
So now I have to do some rethinking on this lady. She's been a libertarian since like the 80s.
Yep.
So this one has been around before any of this nonsense infected libertarianism or the party. So I think she's very bright. So I'm having trouble reconciling how someone could be a 1982 libertarian with this. I don't understand that.
I'll tell you the speech that she gave, and I'll send it to you. The speech that she gave, it's up to like 42 views. So this speech
That's not a prime number. We got to change that.
So she gives this speech and she opens up talking about the war on drugs. And then she was talking about like the healthcare system and how it's overregulated and government, we haven't had a true free market. And like she makes some good points in all of it. It's not very inspiring or passionate. It's just kind of like a dull academic talk.
Sure.
But the thing that jumped out at me was just that this could have been her speech in 2012, in 2002, in 1992, in 1982.
Yeah.
She could have said the exact same thing. And to be a politician running for president in 2020 and to not be speaking about the moment that we're living in, when we've lived through the craziest year in any of our lifetimes, just seems so out of touch and tone deaf. And it's not that she's not smart or that she's not a really good libertarian. I think she's both of those things. Like she's both very smart and a very good libertarian. But man, is this just so tone deaf? Like you got to open with where we're at as a country right now.
Is this just her speechwriter doing all this? Is that what it is? That she's completely in the back seat? I don't understand this.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to that. But either way, it falls on her.
Yeah, I guess it does. I'm just having trouble reconciling how you get to this point. I don't understand how the LP, where they find enough people to put this kind of stuff over and run the party, because everyone who I've ever met who is a member of the Libertarian Party in my lifetime is very high in the spectrum, low empathy, certainly not preaching this nonsense, and are ready to give children handguns.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a very weird thing, but the wokeism or like critical race theory, or the academic stuff behind the woke culture has really, I mean, it's spread like an unbelievable amount. It's spread through our entire society, and it's also spread through the Libertarian Party. And I don't exactly understand how the Libertarian Party got infected with this stuff, but they are, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, I wish I could figure out how they got to this point, because it seems to have come out of nowhere. I think these people regard libertarian, in general, these types regard libertarianism as juvenile and ridiculous, and a kind of this, it's cool when you're in high school reading your Ayn Rand, but now we're grown-ups and we have to talk about power differentials. And how are you going to affect power differentials at the state? You're going to read the Galt speech, cool story, kiddo. Like, let's go away. We have the adults in the room. And of course, you're going to think that this is what happens. You have a party run overwhelmingly by white males. So I am surprised. I also am, again, like you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, and I guess you and I are so focused on actually affecting change and a bit, I'm not even that focused on it, but it's just a consequence of persuasion, that when someone is trying to do that and they have nothing to show for it, I always wonder, like, aren't you going back to the drawing board? Why are you? But then I guess, do you not want to win? Like, it's very hard for me to understand their thinking.
I think that there's a lot of people at the higher levels of the Libertarian Party who have aspirations, political aspirations, in the future. And I mean, like the guy Nick Sarwark, who I debated back in the day, and he's out of the he's not the chair anymore, but he's running for some other office now. He ran for mayor, now he's running for some other office. He wants to run for things in the future, and I think there's a lot of them like that who have these aspirations. And in that case, I used to think of it like this when you talk about like why it did Comedy Central become so boring and dull, and why are they not finding the next Louis C.K. and the next Bill Burr, and why are they going with these safe, woke, left-wing nerd comedians? And it's like, well, if you're that person, right, and you put the next Louis C.K. on, and there's some scandal,
Yeah.
and you might get fired. And what's the worst thing that could happen to you? You get fired, you know? So these Libertarian Party types, they know they're not going to win the presidency. So what's the worst thing that could happen to them is that they're perceived as racist, that they're not allowed in the club anymore. And that's why so many of them at the top, they loved Bill Weld. They loved Gary Johnson. They loved that ticket, because now we're kind of in. We're in. I can go on MSNBC and I can kind of be in this crowd, you know, like I can maybe run for something someday. And so I think, just speculating, but I think that's what the motivation is.
They are very fortunate that no one found those Gary Johnson newsletters, because those were a piece of work. They were so boring.
Well, that is the weird thing that you know, that Andy Craig guy. And by the way, I said I'm not going to talk about these guys anymore, but it's your show and you're asking me about it, so I have an excuse for this one. But one of the things that he was arguing in this debate, if you can call it that, that we had, was that he goes, you know, the stuff that you've done where you've talked to the, you know, these alt-right guys, it's just like the Ron Paul newsletters and Murray Rothbard writing about David Duke. It has caused this movement no end of trouble. And like, that's how they look at it. Like, we've caused the movement trouble by doing this. And it's like, dude, you have like 900 followers on Twitter. What movement is there without all the people that you're naming? Like, what are you talking about? You sit here and say Ron Paul caused the movement all this trouble. Ron Paul's the reason there's a movement. Yes. You know, Murray Rothbard, Ron Paul, all these people, they're the reason that anyone knows what a libertarian is. So you can look around and say, oh, look, I mean, Dave Smith and Michael Malice and Tom Woods and these guys have all this baggage. This causes me problems. It's like, well, what are you bringing in?
Wait, problems with whom? No one knows who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
With your parents?
Yeah, it's very strange. And it's like, no, that's not actually what's going on here. What's going on here is that you have this worldview that this will cause problems in the future, but you don't actually have anything to show for that.
Oh God. It's also funny because a large part of politics, as people understand, is people are not intelligent, they're not informed, and they're drawn to energy or stature. A lot of people, this happened in 2008. I was at Yale, and I was talking to some chick. I was there with a buddy, and she was the niece of Plouffe, I think his name is David Plouffe, Barack Obama's campaign manager, something like that. And she couldn't wait for Obama to get elected. And he asked her, he goes, why do you like Obama so much? You know, please educate me. And she's like, oh, McCain is so old, and blah, blah, boy, George was terrible. And he's like, okay, that's fair. Why do you like Obama so much? And she couldn't answer. And he wasn't even being mean about it. He goes, I really want to know the other perspective. I don't get it. And she was just like, oh, all these terrible things are Republicans and not one. So, and Trump's the same way. Every time he tweets, you know, his fans imagine him grabbing his, you know, genitals with one hand and tweeting with the other. What people like that don't understand is, unless you've got some heft or stature, just on an animal level, you're not going to get an audience or a crowd. So you look at them and you're like, do you honestly say with a straight face that anyone is going to want to be part of a movement or a scene where you're the alpha? It's embarrassingly stupid to claim this. And there's nothing wrong. I'm not a badass. There's nothing wrong with being like, I can't be a badass, but to try to position yourself as a badass and to talk down to you, it's like, this is what the universities train these types. It's like, you know, to assert dominance and assert stature. It's like, sure, that's a good bluff. Like, if you, like a lot of animals, if you can't be venomous, at least have the colors, they're like, oh crap, maybe it's the venomous one. But when you're having a debate or discussion, if the other person runs the table on you, trying to pull rank what's that going to gain? It's so weird to me.
Yes, it's very weird. And of course, I've noticed this in my limited time in the Libertarian Party. There are a lot of people there who are some of the most beta, socially awkward men that I've ever seen, who then want to lecture you about how to talk to real people. And you're like, what world are you living in that you're the authority on this? And it's a very strange dynamic, and it's unfortunate, because I really do think that there is something to be said for the fact that, like, why the fuck are we always like arguing with other people who pretty much agree with us? But I would just think that people would be able to kind of just on a very simple level understand what you just said and go, well, yes, obviously there are certain things that are leadership qualities, and some people have them and some people don't, and we need people who do.
Yeah. So Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this episode?
My favorite part is bringing back the crossovers. I've missed you, buddy.
You are welcome. Ditto.